this magnificent project and action. And but I'd like to thank you all the organizer and the organization for their generosity and generativity. I think that generativity is the source that could solve a lot of our problems, a lot of the Gaia's problems. Generosity is fundamental. So I have to share with you a lot of idea and thesis and research pathways in a few minutes. So I apologize first of all because I have to be synthetic, not exhaustive. And but in this day, in this very inspiring and stimulating days, I learned a lot from you all, and I try to wrote many notes about the president speech. So we can start. We can start with this particular imagine, the black swan, that, as you know, is an old metaphor, a metaphor that was used also by the ancient to define, to indicate an unpredictable event, to indicate the case. I had always the idea, the opinion, the conviction that this metaphor is a retrorationalization, a classical retrorationalization that human beings, we, use to not only to define an unpredictable situation, but first of all and especially to justify our impreparation, our inadequacy to try to face with the unpredictability and with the error. Unpredictability and error, in my opinion, are not only the basis of scientific knowledge, but they are also the fundamental variables that make us human beings, free human beings. So you can see that there is this black swan, and I think that the truth is the opposite. What is continue to be missing is the awareness that emergency and black swans are intrinsic parts of the complex system. We are continuing to think to reality as an infinite sequence of white swan. White swan are the complicated system that are artificial, mechanicistic system, and we are able to observe, to measure this particular kind of system. And when we are able to measure a system, all the dimensions of the system, of the ecosystem, we are able also to make predictable the evolution, the non-linear evolution of that system and ecosystem. So, in my opinion, the very idea of managing complexity is a contradiction in terms. It's not a problem also and only a terminological or semantic problem. In this case, the so-called hard sciences support this thesis, this hypothesis, because in particular physics told us that the complex systems are characterized from several variables, parameters, and systemic nature of relationship, but they are characterized, first of all, from the capacity of auto-organization, capacity for every single part of the system of auto-generativity, and they are characterized from the emergent properties. that is fundamental, because emergent properties are related to those particular dimensions of the complex system that are not observable from the start, because they emerge during the nonlinear evolution of the system. An example, you can think to our brain. Our brain that is perhaps the most complex of the complex system. We can observe in this system the synapses. We can observe the neurons. We can observe and measure electricity. We can observe and measure the chemical reaction. We are not able to observe the emergent properties of the brain, of our mind as a complex system, the thinking. The thinking is the emergent properties of the complex system, brain, mind. So, the sum of the part, as you know, in the complex system, don't coincide with the whole, the system, because the difference is the emergent properties, are the emergent properties. Wow, a lot of problem and criticalities. I am aware that it's very difficult to try to deal with all this problem. They are in this situation suggestion, and I hope that stimulating thinking. We try to underline the close relationship between our incapacity to create a culture of complexity that is, in my opinion, a culture of responsibility and sustainability. Generally, at the level of public discourse and mediatic narratives and representation, complexity is confused with more difficult, bigger, a blurry situation, and is related to a problem that what kind of responsibility for each one, and underline, emphasize the systemic and the complex dimension of the phenomena means underline and emphasize the systemic and relational dimension of that system. Another point, to highlight the urgency of a systemic approach to complexity and of rethinking education. Yesterday we told about the necessity, the urgency of rethinking the same idea and concept of science, because the classical idea and vision of science is based on some traditional scientific pillars, the principle of causality, the principle of linearity. Linearity means, as you know, that we can able to explain the phenomena and the process in terms of linear process, cause, effect, stimulus, and response. But the nature of the relationship and phenomena that we are observing is systemic. The total interconnectedness. So we have to go beyond some false dichotomies. Third point, reflect briefly on some false dichotomies, for example, complexity versus simplification. And I'd like to clear that the opposite of complexity isn't simplification. That is a false dichotomy. The opposite of complexity is the reductionism, the general tendency to reduce all the problem, the explanation of our problems, to just only scientific sector, just only system of variables and parameters, just only approach. But we need bridge, to integrate the approach, to integrate the methodologies, to integrate, first of all, the epistemologies. The problem is what we consider now, also after the so-called digital revolution, what we consider now knowledge. What is knowledge today for us? Because another false dichotomy, in my opinion, is the distinction, the difference between real and virtual. I think that virtual is only another situation, another dimension of reality. To debate what I call the great illusion of the hyper-technological civilization. What are these illusions? The illusion of absolute rationality. We are dealing with an enormous availability of data that are important, are extraordinary resources. And this enormous, infinite availability make us in the condition of choose rational action, rational strategies. It is the old idea of economic rationality that is based on the mechanism that availability of data we make us able to choose, to decide, evaluating the relationship between cost and benefit. When an action, when a strategist, in an action and strategist, cost is more than benefit, that action, that strategist is considered and defined irrational. And I think that the worst thing that we had used this general approach also into the educational and training processes. Our schools and our university were counter-reform based on the principle of utility of knowledge, utility of skills, the neoliberal approach in possession to schools and university. The other great illusion, the total control, is logically consequent to the great illusion of rationality. The idea is that the availability of data, the presence of model, the support of hard sciences, created the condition of the total control and total predictability. So we can think about the possibility of managing complexity. And the illusion of total measurability. I think that this is one of the new forms of reductionism. The idea, the vision, very hegemonic in the sciences, social sciences and other sciences, that we are able to reduct all the qualitative dimension of ecosystem and system to quantitative dimension. We can reduce the study and the evaluation of thinking, of intelligence, of learning. We can think to reduce the fundamental topic of education to solely a technical problem, to digital education. And finally, to reflect then on what I call the grid mistake. The grid mistake, in my opinion, is the gigantic confusion based on the idea, on the hegemonic narratives that for this hyper-technological and hyper-connected society, we need only technicians. We need only hyper-specialists. And I try to clear that specialization versus multi-inter-transdisciplinarity is another of the worst false dichotomies. So what kind of dimension, what are the dimensions involved in this vision, study, and research of complexity? First of all, we are facing with a paradigm shift. We are, yes, I'm aware that we are on the shoulders of giants. There is an infinite scientific lecture on this topic. Paradigm shift that I try to define in the middle of 19 as a complex process of overturn between the natural evolution and cultural evolution. In my opinion, consequently to the extraordinary scientific development and extraordinary technological innovation, human beings are able to control the biological mechanism. And one of the most important implications of this overturn is that social and cultural factors will be more and more important to determine the pathways, the future, the evolution of science. So the project of Apheleia, the project of UNESCO Bridge, are particularly fundamental in this moment because we need to go beyond the traditional, historical, atavistic separation between humanistic studies and scientific studies. You know very well that at this level, and at the level of public discourse, at the level of mediatic discourse, you will not find anyone that is against multi-inter transdisciplinarity, against complexity approach. But in reality, in a lot of countries, multi-inter transdisciplinarity are openly obstaculated. I can make an example. In Italy, but not only in Italy, if I realize a project, a scientific publication, in some particular scientific sector that are not mine, in which I structured, the Italian Ministry of Education doesn't evaluate this project and this publication. And we have the clear impression that these discourses are so hegemonic, not only in the media. The impression that they are goals that we obtained, we reached, but in reality it's not so. There is a long and complex distance to realize our beloved educational and training institution as organism, as open system and not closed system. So I have to go more fast. So this is an example of this general approach. In this situation, UNESCO supported the World Logic Day. And you can see how perfectly are the pieces of this three-dimensional puzzle. And this is the common perception, the common representation of how work knowledge, how work science, how work also the common sense of knowledge. But life, as you know, is not a puzzle. It's not constituted of pieces that we can manage and insert. That is a feature, a characteristic of an artificial, man-made, complicated system. I told you in a very synthetic way that complicated systems are mechanical and artificial systems. They are governed and characterized from linear interaction. They are observable in every dimensions. But not complex living system, not something from the biological, social, or human world. So we continue, and I think that this is the most important challenge, the epistemological challenge. We continue to be educated and trained to isolate, to separate, to identify as single objects what is deeply interdependent and interconnected. You can think to the Cartesian system of thinking. It's based on the idea that we have a big problem. When we face with a big problem, we have to compose and isolate the part of the problem and try to identify which is the part that creates problem. Another metaphor is you can think to our clock. Our clock is a complicated system. When it doesn't work, we can try to open the system, try to identify the mechanism that doesn't work, and then try to substitute the part that doesn't work. When we substitute the part that doesn't work, the system restarts. This doesn't work with complex systems. It's not a problem of isolate. The solution is in the possibility of reconnect the parts. Complexity, that today is more or less the talk of the town, always is simplified with a lot of banalization. The idea is that complexity approach is the general paradigm that make us able to solve any problems. It's not so. Complexity is another outlook, another epistemology, another methodology to face with the phenomenal reality. This is I hope that a very clear figures about the substantial difference between complex system and complicated system. They are both two apples, but in the complicated system is not only a terminological or semantic problem. In the complicated system, you have several mechanisms. You can think also when we try to treat persons, some pathology in the persons, we continue to isolate the problem and isolate the person from the systemic relation. An important, very important psychiatry, Italian psychiatry, whose name was Franco Basaglia, told us that the cure is the pathology. Because in that situation, the treatment to try to cure people was based on the idea of isolating people from the relationship with the others. It's a metaphor also of the analytical thinking. Analytical thinking is fundamental. We arrive at this point thanks to the classical science, thanks to the reductionism, thanks to the Cartesian system of thinking. But today, we are realizing that the problem we are facing, are systemic. We have to reconnect the parts and not isolate the parts. So, the mother of challenge, of educational challenge and training challenge, is trying to redefine thinking and the system of thinking. This is a particular image about the simplification. Because in my opinion, simplification is fundamental. It's a fundamental value. I told you that it isn't the opposite of complexity. But what we continue to be missing is that simplification is not an absolute value. Not everything cannot be simplified. And this is my diagram that I share with you. You can check, for example, the simplification of procedures, reduction of bureaucracy is positive. Simplification has greater accessibility. Jeremy Ricci told us that we are in the age of access. Access is a new right, a new human, social, and political right. Simplification is positive if it means more rapid and efficient organization. At the level of language, simplification of language is important because it's the structural condition to create a more symmetrical relationship between the citizens and the power. But you know very well that an excessive of simplification of language produce simplification of thinking, of way of thinking. And you can think to the narration romances of Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. Simplification of language, simplification of communication produce simplification of thinking. At other level, I think that it's very dangerous to try to simplify communication. The new form of reduction is reduced communication, the idea, the concept, the complexity of communication to connection. We are living in the hyper-connected, interconnected ecosystem and society, but at the moment, a lot of international and national research are telling us that we are facing also with more inequalities that are cultural and social inequalities. So it was demonstrated that the technological infrastructure are fundamental, but are not sufficient to create the conditions that are social and cultural, the condition of the equality, the condition of the emancipation of people. Yesterday, we debated about the importance of citizenship. I think that I use this formula. The rules of engagement of citizenship are changed, are radically changed. And today, being citizens is not a legal problem. It's not a problem of rules. It's a problem of access to quality of education. It's a problem of access to educational and training institutions that are projected and realized on criteria of equality, not utility. And so another level of simplification that is very risky and dangerous for me is the idea of simplification of democracy. You can think to all the general and hegemonic narratives about the disintermediation. The idea that the so-called digital revolution, that is fundamental, would and could and should create the condition of the direct relationship with the power. I think that we are dealing with the simulation of citizenship, simulation of participation. I have to go more fast. And okay, I prefer to show you the slide about the false dichotomies, because I think, as you know, false dichotomies is an old and historical concept or definition of the philosophical theories. My study and research were based on the idea, on the possibility of recognize, renown, define what are these false dichotomies and which are the implications of these false dichotomies. something are historical, atavistic. The fourth dichotomy is because between nature and culture, between natural and artificial. But I have to ask you, which are the boundaries between natural and artificial today? We are living in an ecosystem that are totally artificial. That is a new kind of nature. But we are continuing to dealing with this kind of complexity and complex system, keeping separate scientific sector, keeping separate skills, keeping separate knowledge. So all is interconnected also during this pandemic. Which are the evidence of this dramatic emergency, global and systemic emergency, whose name is pandemic? It shows us that there is a big problem about knowledge sharing, about the possibility of sharing data. Everyone talks about the importance of sharing data, sharing knowledge. But I think that the most important criticalities is related to the reductionistic approach, reductionistic and deterministic approach to this kind of problem. Another point that I like to share with you is the concept of tyranny of concreteness. The tyranny of concreteness, I like to be clear. I'm a sociologist, a social scientist with a methodological background, and a philosopher. So I have all the fatal error according to the hyper-technological civilization paradigm that is based on the idea that human factor could be and should be marginalized. So data are fundamental. We have to be clear. Data are fundamental to take decisions. But I think that data, for example, cannot tell us about the qualitative factors, the relationship. The relationship and the qualitative factor must be emphasized and highlighted from the researchers, from the scholars. The qualitative factors are what motivates us to go beyond the rational of always looking for something useful in what we do or study. This is the general paradigm of the neoliberal approach to school and university. But the problem, in my opinion, is that our obsession with concreteness, or to be more exact, the current tyranny of concreteness that is oppressing our age, with the idea that only technicians or hyper-specialized profiles are needed in the future, will only lead us further and further into what I call the great mistake. And the great mistake is the carte blanche we have delegated to technique and technology has permeated all aspects of society, including our schools, with the idea that educational processes are a question of a purely technical nature, solely a problem of skills and know-how, and other false dichotomies. Knowledge versus competences. Knowledge versus skills. Oh, I have to go beyond the snake oil salesman, but I think that, as I told you, another of this great illusion of the hyper-technological civilization is the idea of we can eliminate error. And you know very well how error is eliminated are banned as with a stigma. No? The idea is also at a pedagogical level. We are continue to educate to try to evitate the error. But error is the base of the scientific knowledge. Error is the base of every learning processes. And these are some of the risks that we are facing if we don't try to change radically the education. The risks are the simulation of communication, simulation of participation, citizenship without citizen. Citizenship without citizen. Because today, being citizen means, in my opinion, to have access to quality of educational processes. So, recognize and also making connection, I think that should be the principal goals of educational and training processes, with a particular attention on the acronym of the first three letters, education, EDU. No? Is stand for error, D for doubt, and U for unpredictability. I can go. So I have to close. Okay. So I go to. So what's a proposal for the future? A proposal for the future. Proposal for the future regards what kind of preparation we have to define for our children, for our students, but also for our scholar and researcher. I try to end with the proposal. Hybrid figures is a concept of the artistic world and creative world. I think that the substantial difference is not only in the use of word, but is at a theoretical level, in the operational definition of the words. Hybrid figures are not and I think that Apheleia and UNESCO Bridge could and should work in this direction, one of this direction. Hybrid figures are not experts of everything. Hybrid figures are figures that are specialized in their sector, but the common language, the common basis of these figures is epistemological, logical, epistemological, and methodological common language. The problem, I repeat, is how we consider knowledge and how we can achieve and reach knowledge. Okay, this is the general paradigm. I close with the Chinese proverb, very nice, interesting. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. Thank you.
I think this was a very interesting presentation that leaves room for a long discussion. But because of the time, I would invite Luís. Oh, you want to say something? Okay, Robert, with the privilege that he's leaving today.
Sorry. Thank you, Piero, for this very suggesting talk. You're right, you have to try to rethink our manner of thinking, of feeling. And complexity is perhaps the main antidote to stupidity. Fascism, Trumpism, intolerance, racism. But what do you think of the conspiracy theories? really popular today, that are a mission to deny complexity and more generally the knowledge, in fact. So I think it's the word which is lacking on your teach. You see what I mean? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I apologize because I was I'm not awareness of time that. Thanks a lot for your question, Robert. I think that I try to be synthetic. It's very challenging. I think that about the risk of reductionistic and deterministic approach, and the risk about the ideologization of the concept of simplification is the simplification of democracy. And I think that, but I really hope that we'll have also other occasions. I think that our beloved democracies enter into crisis, especially when they think as ecosystem and system, that they can simplify the complexity of the problem. So also the conspiracy theories is based on the idea that complex problem have simple solution to this kind of problem. But I'd like to be clear. Complex, it doesn't mean more difficult. It doesn't mean biggest. It doesn't mean blurred boundaries. It doesn't mean underline and support and emphasize the systemic and relational dimension of the problem. And the conspiracy theories go in the direction of the confusion, go in the direction of a society that is not a knowledge society. It's a society of ignorance, because the quality of our educational and training institution is so low, generally. But I think that the solution that is temporary and variable is not a technical or technological solution. The solution to the fake news is not the checking list, fast checking, or in the delegate to the software. The solution is the education of people, of critical thinking, to critical thinking and system thinking. Because the problem is all the freedom of expression. Today, you know that, for example, alternative opinion are banned as fake news. This is a problem. I have an opinion different for you. Is a fake news? It's a problem also of democracy.
Thank you very much, Piero and Robert as well. I think, in fact, I will not give more room for questions now because we have 3 more colleagues to speak in the morning.
Yes,
but I'm sure we will continue the discussion in the afternoon because we will have time, and I think this is a very, very important. I actually changed the program because of intervention of Piero, so it will be printed a new version, and there will be some modifications before the end of the week. But now I would thank again Piero.
No, thanks for you.
I'm sure that Chaos and Apheleia will do many things together from now on. And I invite Luís Santos for his presentation. Luís is my colleague at Tomar. He is a biologist and he is also an expert in ecology. In that context, he became the coordinator of a very important project that we have that has a strong relation to the concerns on cultural landscape. This project is called Highlands. It's a H2020 or Horizon program. And Luís will be explaining, so I was already starting. But he knows a lot of things. But because I was making a joke, but maybe it was not your slide, it was Piero's. I just saw my name wrongly spelled. So I was going to say he doesn't know how to spell my name. Anyway. Marta, aspetta. No. Okay, Luís, the floor is yours. I'm going to say.
you get this bar down? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, because I was looking for the down. Yeah, it's okay. I never used this, so. Okay. I don't need the notes. That doesn't matter. It's okay. So, Professor Osterbeck just made my presentation. Yes, I'm an environmental biologist, and my specialty is ecology, as mentioned by Professor Osterbeck. I prefer. I prefer to stand. I mean, just Okay, so Highlands project, it's basically a huge project which involves 26 countries now, and basically 43 partners, both stakeholders and universities, academics. So mentioning the Highlands project, Highlands have always been interesting places, and interesting in a point of view that each time humanity had a problem, they used highlands and they used mountains, and they still do. I mean, mountains have always been a safeguard, a stronghold for humanity throughout the generations, since prehistorical times. We always, each time there is a catastrophe, there is a tragedy, we run away to the mountains. And we never use the lowlands to escape. So, bearing that in mind, and bearing all the problems that the world is facing nowadays, we start thinking of, aren't we in a catastrophic situation at the moment? We're talking about climate change. We're talking about chaos, problems within our cities, within our communities. Aren't we, or shouldn't we look at islands as maybe a way to escape some of these problems? And obviously Highlands are also suffering from these problems themselves. So in bearing that in mind, we should and we need to study islands and try to preserve this last piece of heaven that we still have. I mean, we do classify them as protected areas, we do classify them as many other, with other classifications, but are we understanding islands and the intricate relationships that they have with the lowlands and between themselves, and how they manage to survive in such a harsh environment? I mean, islands are a harsh environment. So the project idea, which you've seen before, has objectives, mainly the relevance of islands at European scale and global scale, the demand for models of inclusive local development in islands. Okay, some might argue, are we trying to look at and make islands developed? No, we're not trying to make islands developed. We're trying to understand how they develop at their own pace. And we're trying to understand what mechanisms they use to develop themselves. So diversity at local and developmental ideas. So how are we going to do this? Basically, we do semi-structured interviews, and we go to several islands, both European and worldwide, and we visit these places and we talk to stakeholders, we talk to municipalities, we talk to local governments, and we try to understand exactly what they, how they survive in these harsh environments and what kind of sustainable approach they have. And believe me, they do have sustainable approaches, which we just scraping the surface at the moment. So implementation of the project, okay, among other things, a big project will have to produce a database and produce some information. We're trying to make some documentaries. We're trying to make some way to teach other countries and other places, learning from what was mentioned before, our own mistakes. So how big is it? Yeah, we got the Iberian Peninsula, the Pyrenees, we got the Massif Central, the Alps, the Apennines in Italy, we got all those places, plus we have all the other big, huge mountain ranges around the world. And that's basically our scope. That's why we have so many partners. So how are we going to structure the project? The project is started in 2020, and there is coordination. Work package 2, which I lead, and the Polytechnic leads. Work package 3 is analysis and comparison and modeling. And the third is building a multi-stakeholder, inclusive, sustainable development in Highlands decision platform. Okay, this sounds very interesting. What we do the same as every other European finance project, which is we make a lot of research, and we make a lot of presentations, and we publish a lot of articles. So this is just some idea of the presentations that we make. Just to make it clear to you what we do in Highlands, I brought you one of our presentations, which was selected particularly for this. It was presented in the International Mountain Conference in Austria, and obviously it's not just me, it was some other people, but that study one small aspect of highlands, of mountains, and that connects mountains to lowlands. And this is important. It's not just looking at a specific thing. Like when we talk about complexity, complexity is about connections. And when we talk about connections, it's how we connect the highlands with the lowlands, and how this has been throughout the years. Obviously, when we start looking at transhumance, what is transhumance? Basically, a simple human observation of what animals do naturally. We just observe that animals migrate from lowlands to highlands, and we basically, once we become sedentary, we fix ourselves in the lowlands. Basically, we just, well, animals didn't have food, so we have to do what animals do. We take them to the mountains, where it's green pastures. So basically, transhumance started like that, and this is just a history idea. Obviously, transhumance has been in our culture, in our society, throughout the generations. I mean, St. John Baptist is just celebrated on 24th of June, exactly because of transhumance. I mean, it's associated to this particular aspect. So, what kind of transhumance we have? We have descending transhumance, ascending transhumance, and pendulous transhumance. And this is obviously, I won't go through it. And what happens in Portugal? And this is what we do. We try to study exactly the mechanisms and how they work within a certain location. So we have transnational, which means transboundary, because we're very good at making limits, administrative limits, but nature doesn't understand them. And obviously there's economic factors, and those transhumance from Spain to Portugal, both on the Galician and the Extremadura side, which lasted for many years, and obviously was transhumance routes from Portugal, inland Portugal, to the mountain areas of Portugal. So obviously, transhumance suffered abandonment. And abandonment, why? Because basically, not only the raw product, milk, meat, and wool, stopped becoming interesting as an economic aspect. And also because young people didn't want to do the jobs. People started looking into, and humans are very keen on that. Basically, we rely on technology to solve problems, and, well, we pray that technology sorts out all problems. It doesn't. So, looking into this, transhumance has become an interesting aspect. From the 70s, the transhumance stopped in Portugal, and the last transhumant course happened in 1998 of the last century. So the end of the last century was the last long route transhumant, not short route, I mean long route. And what happens is breeders need transhumance nowadays. Why? They do it intensively, and the ones that actually still want to do it, the pastures on the highlands are not so grazed. What happens is, well, they have pastures nearby, so they don't need to go the long distance actually to do this. So consequences. Well, consequences are intensive enclosed animals, property fencing, landscape transformed into agricultural fields, olive groves and vineyards, uncontrolled vegetation growth, privileged by biophyte species, demographic reduction, eucalyptus plantations, and this changes our landscape. So the simple fact that we stop one cultural activity dramatically changed our landscape. So our landscape is now like this, as opposed to having what was before. And this causes catastrophic events, such as the wildfires in Estrela Mountain, which is a natural park last year. And this was continuous for 7 days. It was 7 entire days burning, the equivalent of 24,000 hectares in burn area. And actually, just this one fire was 4% of all the burn area in the European Union last year. And this is going to happen again, believe me. So, what is of transhumance nowadays? Well, because tourism is kind of like, you know, the big flag that is going to save every single country. Yes, we do it with transhumance as well. So basically it's a cultural manifestation, basically for tourists. Well, we make them all happy and goats look good for a day or two, and tourists are happy by seeing this. Well, yes, we do cheese production, and we actually use tourism as a form of selling this product, and we use, obviously, the mountains and the other assets that mountains can offer us. So as a tourist activity, well, short distance routes, yeah, tourists don't want to walk too much. They don't want to do a 5-day trail through the lowlands into the highlands. So what we do is the transhumance party and obviously those sort of manifestations. So tourism and transhumance, or transhumance and tourism. And this is what Highlands wants to study. Is it a point of bringing transhumance back in the way that it was, or will it be in the way that it was? Maybe not. Maybe we cannot bring it back to the way it was, but maybe after that big tragic event in Estrela Mountain, we could bring transhumance back. At least try and see what happens to those areas that were burned. We have a small window, very small window, which means, you know, the shepherds, they don't like woods. They want nice green grass for their pastures. And now, after all that area was burned, we have an opportunity, a window of 2 years until we can put their goats and other herds of animals grazing on the mountains and recover maybe some of the traditional and the cultural aspects by, and thus preserving the possibility of a recurrence of these wildfires. Because bearing in mind nature conservation, which is a big flag, and you can say, well, biodiversity is much higher when we have woods and forests, it's actually not true. When we have grazed fields, we have different biodiversity, and different does not mean it's less. And this is an important thing, because I study natural protected areas. So what's our idea? Well, bring young people to the territories. You cannot make this without people. And if you start looking at these areas, no young people want to live in these harsh environments. It's very difficult for them to actually go back to these harsh environments. Land ownership, which is a big problem in Portugal. Well, a lot of this land is owned by government. Not a very good thing. Legislation, long distance transhumance. Oh, well, we need infrastructures and we need incentives. Well, and that brings us back to the agricultural common deal that European Union imposed on us, and we have to maybe think of that. And when we're saying think of that, maybe bring transhumance as a word into that specific deal. Because it's not there. We talk about intensive agriculture, we talk about different things, but because transhumance has been such an activity that's been lost, we don't talk about transhumance. is not in the common agriculture, and it needs to be. This needs to be changed. And then cattle herding, and obviously associations and cooperatives, and do what we do the best. This is the people that presented, but we don't do just transhumance, and we don't do just cultural things. We talk about, and we study several environments, and I want to show you a different approach. And a different approach is to communicate science. This was another presentation that we've done, and better me presenting here is actually trying to show you a video, which is another approach Highlands has of trying to make small documentaries of these mountain areas and try to show them to people. Well, it's not a very professional one, but it's what we do in Highlands. And better than me talking is, well, I will be talking as well in the video, but never mind. You will be seeing it, okay? So I will put the video on, and then we can try to, if I can. If I can work this mouse. Okay, got it.
The rising sun at the Fornia, a steep-head valley, a natural amphitheater created by a geological phenomenon resulting from the erosion of the calcareous plateau, offers a unique view over the mainly fertile valley. Located in the heart of Portugal, within the Monte Junto Estrela mountain range, rise Serras d'Aire and Candeeiros mountains. A limestone core rising sun at the Fornia, a steep-head valley, a natural amphitheater created by a geological phenomenon resulting from the erosion of the calcareous plateau, offers a unique view over the mainly fertile valley. Located in the heart of Portugal, within the Monte Junto Estrela mountain range, rise Serras d'Aire and Candeeiros mountains. A limestone core under the Mediterranean climate makes these mountains fine educational examples of science and sustainability for generations to come. Let's rediscover this magical place. Limited by the lack of fertile soil, small villages speckle the landscape. The scarce red soil, terra rossa, spikes human ingenuity, using the plentiful rocks as reservoirs of every inch of soil, where people grow their crops and pastures. Every parcel is fenced with meticulously placed limestone slabs. Rock walls that extend as far as the eye can see paint the landscape in a limestone canvas. Inside every parcel, walls of irregular rocks, caneiros, and rock mounds, maroços, are the result of many years of cleaning to clear and protect this precious resource. Animals and transhumans always played an important role in the lives of these people. The dry rock walls that extend for miles, besides protecting the plots from aeolian erosion, they limit property and stop the roaming cattle from destroying crops. Numerous shepherd shelters decorate the mountain. These abrigos are timeless records of what was once transhumance, a tradition and craftsmanship preserved through centuries. Nowadays, these re-elaborated plot shelters, casinhas, are the pride of every family, caring and maintaining this heritage. The pale green of olive trees, a dominant feature of this landscape, occupies every plot and slope on these mountains. Beyond subsistence, an example of how these people understand the fine thread sustainability portrays. The choice of a resilient tree that holds humidity and gives them olive oil establishes this balance. Unlike most mountain areas, Serras d'Aire and Candeeiros don't hold surface water, except for the plentiful rain years where the Miradouro Polge is filled and the Fornia waterfall announces a prosperous year. This abundant yet scarce resource for these people percolates through the many limestone crevices and sinkholes, directing water away to several lowland springs arising from caves. Human adaptation to water scarcity results from the observation of natural limestone reservoirs named pièges. A concept adapted by every household where the rainwater is collected from their roofs and channeled to man-made cisterns. Trees are one of the most important elements of this landscape. They extract water from the mist. This fog drip enables a few green patches during the estival season. It's of extreme importance to maintain cattle. These peculiar mountains hold yet another secret. Underground, a new world of caves and galleries opens through the hidden entrances, some yet to be discovered. This intriguing landscape, which holds records of the past and solutions for the future, offers an imaginary setting that fascinates tourists and scientists alike. A mix between the old and the new, where its essence sustains time. Let's take a closer look on how these people adapt. The Algar do Pena is the largest cave room in Portugal, with 85 meters deep and an area of 1,400 square meters. This is an example of how the mining industry development can promote science and education. Managed by the Nature and Forest Conservation Institute, this research center is used by many universities to study cave-dwelling species, where numerous research papers published and new species registered. A mere 30 kilometers away from the ocean lay the only Portuguese inland freshwater salt mine. The Rio Maior salt mine, an artesian well with water 7 times saltier than seawater. Managed by a cooperative of salt producers, preserving a traditional way from the wooden houses to the way the salt is sorted. You can see these people put their heart and soul in everything they do. Terra Chã Cooperative, an initiative that promotes local development and patrimonial safeguard, is an example of community-based development. The many workshops, the weaving museum, the gutter and cisterns rehabilitation are some of the many activities offered by the cooperative. The community goat herd, with 150 goats grazing the mountains, carefully chosen trails of vegetation management offer a wildfire prevention strategy. This project contributes to educate while preserving endangered traditions. just stop and look closely. Sometimes it is the people who no one imagines anything of, who do the things no one can imagine. Imagine yourself being here.
Okay, this is just, thank you very much. This is just one example of the many Highlands we'll try to do. And this is a way to preserve some images that will be unique, and maybe they will be used in the future for different research, whereas we're doing research at the moment, but you know, trying to keep these ideas for future generations, and mainly learning from a lot of activities and simplicity, because though simplifying in scientific terms might be complicated, sometimes these people simplify what we try to complicate. Thank you very much.
Here will be able to interact with thank you, with Luís. You have also seen the goat. The goat is from my family. The goat has a relation to walls, which is similar to my relation with computers. We basically collapsed them. Before coffee, is there anyone who wants to raise something? Yes, you wanted, Stephen? I thought you did.
Thanks. Thanks very much for a great presentation and an enjoyable film. I was curious to know, I'm really glad to see you emphasizing science communication as part of this project, and I'm just a little curious to know how the science communication is organized and how much the different scientific team members are involved actually in the framing of the scientific communication.
Yeah, that I shouldn't say it's a very interesting question, because that means I don't know how to answer, but no, we had several discussions throughout the project. I can tell you that the first year of the project was mainly discussing things. We did not advance anything. You know, it got to the point where we were desperate, because, I mean, just talking 1 year on what is sustainability, it was just about that. You know, we were 1 year there discussing, because we're a multidisciplinary team. We have people from the social science, we have people from the geography, we have the natural sciences, we have the physics, mathematicians, and so on, and trying to talk a common language between those people, it's very complicated. And exactly there, we found a common interest. It was exactly on the communicating science, because each one of us wanted to communicate our own scientific findings. And I said, like, why not do a documentary where we can all pitch in? You know, you will try your mathematician approach in islands that actually worked with those. I mean, and I just did this. This is a first trial. It was presented in September last year. The project will go on until 2025, but this was just the first. This was just to show the partners, well, yeah, I mean, this is what we can do. So, but the idea and is actually catching up. So people are trying to do in their own mountain range, trying to do a similar one, well, their own ability, trying to do their own documentaries, pitching in with all the different areas of science, and actually getting, and it's an interesting approach that I tried to introduce there, which was sometimes if you are looking, because I'm looking at this from my own perspective where I know the territory, but if someone comes from another country, they have a completely different approach. I mean, some things are here that actually were seen by other people that come from other countries. And this is an interesting thing, and it's where islands should capitalize, because we have a huge partners, researchers, and we can actually do much better by pitching in and actually do a collaborative project, because that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know if I answered you exactly, but
one thing I would love to yell this out, say is that I think the idea of having, okay, sorry, I know we're on YouTube too, so yeah, you did answer it, and the thing that I keyed in on is that by having this sort of common problem, regardless of your specialization differences, it gives something other than, it gives sort of a common task that you can rally around together, because you're both doing this to communicate across disciplines, but also to communicate with the public. And so I think that this is something that more and more I'm finding innovative approaches where you actually, instead of outsourcing that communication, build it into the scientific work, can be something that can actually reinforce and strengthen transdisciplinarity.
It is exactly there, because the transdisciplinary approach is something essential for this, and something we catch up by discussing all these 2 years of project that we have is that no matter how high the mountain is, or how close to the sea, or even if it is in one island in the middle of the Atlantic, people think alike and people act alike, because it's the environment that shapes them into adapting to their own characteristics. It's amazing. It's actually phenomenal to find someone in Argentina doing the same thing as someone in the Alps, exactly on the same initiative, by doing exactly the same thing. And for example, here on Serra da Ira Candeeiros, which is a mountain that goes up to 650 meters, people behave exactly the same way as they would behave up on the Estrela mountain, which is 2,000 meters. So it doesn't matter, it's mountain people. Those are, I don't want to put a label on it, but they have their own particular approach.
Yeah, well, thank you for your presentation. It's curious because your project is kind of, so it's in a much advanced stage of the project that I will be presenting tomorrow. But since I'm really in the beginning, I would like you to share with us. So this is a transdisciplinary project. So you said that you are from the exact sciences, let's call it like that, or natural sciences. So you are speaking with people that are from social sciences, humanities. How did you manage that process, and how did you get to a common language? And so how did you weather the storm of transdisciplinarity?
We didn't. There's one thing I'm going to share with you here today. It's called scare tactics. It works. Because when you tell them, when you go to the midterm project meeting and you sit in front of the European Commissioner or the European Project Officer, and you're just presenting your results, and you have the exact sciences people presenting numbers and accomplishment and done, and the social sciences people presenting, okay, their own results, which I do understand that they're science. But the problem is, the project officer wants to see numbers. And then we just sit down in a room, and this I'm telling you from experience of this project, we sit down in the room, and then you have the humanities people saying, okay guys, we can work together. Because that's what the project officer wants. We can all do science. And this is for result-based. So the scare tactics worked very well when this happened. And then on the other side, our discussions between exact sciences and social sciences, they're fruitful. I think we learn a lot from them, and they can learn a lot from us. Key issue, you need to have active people. So if you got a good communicator, put them up there. And people can establish the bridge. So if you choose carefully key members of the team that can actually bridge the two sides, those are the key assets that you have to put up there on the middle of the room and give them the importance they need to be given in order to establish these bridges. Because you will always, as in politics, have extremes. Yeah? But you don't want to focus on the extremes. Because if you focus on the extremes, you reach nowhere. And that's my opinion. From experience of observing what the project is. So my advice to you is choose key members, and I'm not saying use them, but give them the that they deserve in order to establish the bridge. Even if it's just at some point. But this normally works. This is like project strategy. But you have to manage a project. When you have to manage a project, even though you're result-based, you have deliverables, and those are numbers. And those have to be objective. And we cannot say, well, we were discussing sustainable development for a year, we still did not get to the point. They want to say, like, okay, in the meantime, if you did discuss that, could you make, for example, a lexicon of all the words that were associated to sustainable development? You need to have this kind of like people that are committed to results. And at the same time, people that are committed to discuss science. So you need to have them both. You cannot just delegate on one side or on the other side. I think that's the key issue. Key issue is compromise.
Thank you, Luís. Luís and all of us have earned the right for a coffee. We are a little bit late, but then we will resume. We will have 15 minutes for coffee, and then we come back, okay? Okay, so we resume, and we. There are still people coming. Okay. Okay, so we will now have, as you know, two more presentations. The first one will be by architect Marta Aguiar. Marta is part of a team that is, as an undergoing, some of you already know about. And it is, again, I don't think this is working very well. Anyway, it is again a project that converges with our approach to landscape transformation and societal transformation within that interaction. So, Marta, thank you very much for being here. She came from Oporto and will go back still today, so it's a heavy journey for her. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you to Apheleia and Professor Luís Osterbeck. Thank you also to the Municipality of Março. So I'm here to present the projeto Experimenta Paisagem, Experience Landscape in a literal translation. That is a project that our office, Marta Aguiar, is an architect and urbanism office. We have been developing for the last 4 years. Okay, sorry. Okay. Não está a passar. Se puder. Pus o vídeo, mas não. Cliquei no link do vídeo. Okay. So I will present four moments of this project, 4 cases of experience landscape projects. This project has been developed since 2019 in the interior center of Portugal. and has its main anchor the implementation of an open-air museum, MEP, Museum Experimenta Paisagem, whose mission is to contribute to an integrated development of the landscapes of the region, and the main characteristic of its methodology and curatorship is the creation of permanent contemporary art in the landscape that intensifies the enjoyment of the site cultural landscape. And the other main characteristic is the involvement with the inhabitants and people who are related with the territory. So as you can see in the video, there are lots of moments where talking, participating in activities of local communities. So, okay. So our office is an office of architecture and urbanism from Porto. We have for 25 years we develop projects and works of architecture, design and urbanism, and our office is rooted in the legacy of the work of my father, Marta Aguiar, was an architect and an urbanist. And in this legacy, I would like to highlight the main question that we developed in the exhibition that took place in Serralves in 2018, that was how to lead the transformation. So transformation will always happen. We can be there or not. So in the context of the work of Marta Aguiar, we found not the architect as an author, but the architect who takes different roles and different instruments to somehow conduct or to lead that transformation. To have so in this question it is very important to better define what the understanding of improvement. So this was the case of some cases that we present in the exhibition. So the plan to end with Ruismo in 1981 after the earthquake, or during a long term as urbanism in Espinho with more than 4,000 works developed there to conduct the transformation. So we are therefore very interested in this question of soaring in the long term, anchoring projects in very well-rooted strategies with people who inhabit the territory with their aspirations and with their needs. So different roles, different instruments, and with people who inhabit and who have aspirations of transformation. So the MAP, this museum, is a museum without walls, with free access to an integrated experience of enjoyment, bringing together contemporary creation and cultural landscapes. The two anchor MAP projects are already done in the territory, are the Cortiçada art route and the waterline routes that were developed between 2019 and 21. So these two MAP art routes were developed following the wildfires of 2017 in the context of the Plan of Revitalization of Pinhal Interior, PRPI, in a network project with the municipalities of Proença Nova, Oleiros and Sertã, and with the founding of DG Artes, the cultural, linked to the Cultural Ministry of Portugal. In these itineraries, we developed the creation of five permanent artworks and a cultural trail, as well as this dimension of community participation of the methodology of this museum. So at the heart of this curatorship is the vision of an understanding of the landscape as an organized whole, as a continuous and demanding search for a dynamic balance between human communities, their needs, their aspirations, and the forces of nature. So the first three works of this museum are from the Cortiçada Art Fest route, were created by our collective, from the office and with my sister Sofia Marta Aguiar. It was a very deep, intense process with involvement of communities that led to these three artworks. We see Farol dos Ventos, Lighthouse of the Winds, we see Véu at Sertã, Veil, and then Moongate in Oleiros. So in this particular art route, we tried to, the creative process objective is to reveal a sense of each local cultural landscape, and so it chose, in this case, archetypal places for each artwork. For the Lighthouse of the Wind, for Farol dos Ventos, we choose the mountain, the Serra das Talhadas in Proença Nova, next to Cova da Moura, so an old place with archaeological findings and many, many stories. So the lighthouse emerges as a sign that does not impose itself, but that reveals itself when it is sought, and is standing out from the quartz crest that we see very far away to a sequence of cables that suggest a delicate and upward movement. The lighthouse lands at the end of the reach at a specifically chosen rock, an exact rod, so that the edges would draw a certain movement and a silhouette. When looking at the mountain, the lighthouse stands out of the rough and rigid texture, fragmented into blocks in this massive, and it almost seems to ask to start a movement. So the second place for Veil, is in Sertã. We chose a civic center, a place of encounter of this village of the interior, and we chose a specific place of the civic center. This is the extreme, in the transition between the village and the rural landscape, Parque da Carvalho. So we have here a very strong landscape and cultural identity. And so the veil is an undulating sequence of 6 mirrored sheets, highlighting and multiplying the reflections and relationships between the riverside, the garden, the civic center, and the rural landscape. It makes a kind of a synesthesia effect reinforced by the confrontation between the Philippine bridge, the village, and the rural landscape in apparent memory error. Then the third place and third artwork is Moongate in Oleiros, and we chose a place that is an agricultural valley, a place where landscape is modeled over centuries by human works in search of a balance between nature and human action. In this sense, it is a space that provides rest and contemplation on a humanized scale. Eventually, perhaps the shape, the color, and the textures define. It is an amber circle of 2 meters wide in resin, intentionally framed and strategically placed, evoke the entry into a distant garden. Thus, Moongate may somehow contribute to a reappropriation of the place and the memories of the inhabitants, referring countless stories of resin exploration, but also memories of the first European to reach the Tibet, that is from Oleiros, Father António de Andrade. So the production installation process were developed by our team, and it is inseparable from the involvement with the communities. So over these 3 years, we have developed different activities and involvement actions with the aim of, on one hand, creating works of art that communicate values of each place, and that at the same time contribute to a reappropriation of these territories by the inhabitants, but also by those who are no longer there, but who have left, sometimes come back, those who feel that belong to that place, and those who study or visit. It was a process in which we crossed different approaches and different instruments. We crossed the contacts of the municipalities, reference of people to contact, associations, with our own research and casual encounters, encounters with people who were raising questions, who were already taking care of the spaces of their forest, of their villages, picking olives, placing flowers, making things for the place. And we also crossed conversations and interviews. We participated in local events organized by associations like the Fado Night, and we also organized our own workshops with associations or with scouts, different kind of groups. Then we also articulated with those who work with these communities, institutions, such as Bibliomóvel, that is a movement library that goes to each village, or a center of science education, Centro Ciência Viva da Floresta, with children activities around these artworks. It was therefore natural that at the inauguration, beyond the political event, also became parties. In the case of the fourth artwork, The Girl of the Fears, inauguration party with a walk, a trekking walk, with a picnic, and the other one with a really big party. So it's a movement not also of inauguration, but of giving back the artwork to the community. So we developed an intense and structured process for each phase of the project and for the particular constraints with or without COVID, most of all with COVID. So during the process production of each artwork until the installation, we carried out live visits to the artwork. So in streaming moments, with a progressive involvement, we started with inhabitants of places closest to the artwork, and then extended to people who already lived these villages, like now known musicians, journalists, or the bishop, different people. With the works already finished, we launched online challenges, and that promoted a reinterpretation of each artwork with Centro Ciência Viva da Floresta or schools. So now, where is this museum? So we have the three main first municipalities, Proença Nova, Oleiros e Sertã, and now we are enlarging this project with a different dimension with the municipality of Março, and with another project to the municipalities of Pedrógão Grande and Idenha Nova. So the four moments I would like to present more specifically about the community involvement and the strategy of change in the long term are these four. In Março, we are talking about a small project that tackles a very important issue of the natural resources, the valorization of natural resources of the forest. At the right, you have this MAPS vision, the museum vision for developing a territorial community. So, with all the network of the 5 municipalities. We have also about the work developed with the Girl of the Fears, Menina dos Medos, at Sobral Fernando in Proença Nova, a concrete work of cultural heritage and preservation and valorization. And in Conqueiros, with the work of Magma Seller, a particular community involvement related to the economic and social dynamics of the village. So at Menina dos Medos, Girl of the Fears, this artwork belongs to the route of water lines and is located very near the village of Sobral Fernando on a rock in the river Ocreza, very close to the gates of Almorán, Portos de Almorán. And this girl emerges as an opposition, but also as an anchor. It suggests delicacy in the disorder. It allows a human scale in an almost excess of geological memories, a fragility that nevertheless remains solid in face of the recurrent imposition of memories, of hard lives, of difficulties. The girl is also an anchor, is an encounter between art and nature, and it brings together memories and stories of the past and signals the human capacity of contributing to contradict its own destiny. So this work integrates, first of all, the strategy of the municipality. In one hand, to invest in the nature, in tourism, in natural tourism, in Serra das Talhadas, this crest that we see here, and at the same time to enhance the hydrographic basins. So therefore it articulates through the ridge of Serra das Talhadas, the lighthouse of the winds in one extreme, and the Ocreza and the girl in the other extreme. So the creation of the girl was a process of valuing this matrix of the cultural and geographic landscape, the hydrographic basin, a process of valuing this landscape understood as a whole, as in the concept of as a cultural container. And in this context, the challenge I would suggest is to open the site and to see this trail route where we can find the interviews registered with local inhabitants. So it was a very long and intense process. The local village was developing the refurbishment, restoration of an old shepherd's trail. We got together with them and started to register each story that was related of each place. And so now, in this moment, a visitor that arrives to the trail of Menina dos Medos, of the Girl of the Fears, will find this signature with QR codes and will have the possibility to meet the local inhabitants relating the stories of each place. So in Conqueiros, also in Proença Nova, we created Magma Cellar. And in this case, the process focused in valuing the built heritage. On one hand, in relation to the water line that structures the village and the bridge and is a place of reference and meeting. On the other hand, valuing the village construction material, that is shale, ardósia, xisto, pronto. Magma Cellar is born from these textures of Conqueiros, the schists, from the small streets, the calhas, but also celebrating the gathering of parties from weekends when the inhabitants go from 60 inhabitants during the week to 200 at the weekends, where each family has a wine cellar, and the presence of this water stream where people get together. All this information informed every decision that took part of the creation process, from the creation process to the execution and to the development of the image brand that we developed later. So we use slate that goes to the oven and gets transformed and gets with this appearance that seems the exterior of a pine tree. For that, it took a lot of research, many tests to arrive to this rigor, the rigor of a texture that we wanted, and the rigor of the geometry that had to meet the organic irregularity of each stone. So we looked for this abstract form that represents the encounter, and that provokes to a relation to go inside, to sit, to lie, to experiment with each one's own body, and have a new perspective of the very known landscape. So we explored this question of light, shadow, rotation, simulating almost a movement. And so this is important because this refers not also to the center of the village with the construction in schist, but also with the encounter of people from these places and this desire of people to change and to develop. So talking about Magma Cellar is also talking about the village and also talking about the brand image developed with the community. The brand image is to speak of participatory process that was born from the social and economic dynamic of this community. So the main thing was the fascination with this material, the expanded slate. It looked like the pine exterior. So we developed workshops with textures from schist, from this material. Each one chose the texture they most liked. We made molds, we tested textures, and we held an online voting to choose the color, and then a final event at the village to launch the brand image and to place it in local products such as honey, wine, everything. So we have the final image of the brand image with this circular shape cut by the stream, and of course this movement of the letters in an allusion to the encounter on the riverside, to the wine cellars and party. So the third case is the Experiment Land Stage project that is funded by EE Grants Bilateral Relations. It is a very small project, only of 1 year, but in this project we can launch 3 new dimensions to experience landscape. First, an international dimension. Part of the activities are in Norway, and we have a Norway partner, Sami Ritala Architect. Second, it launched a structural question to Experimenta Paisagem project, that is the possibility of new uses of wood in construction and design, and so the rethinking of forest. And finally, it extends experimental landscape to the municipality of Março. So why Março? In fact, because this municipality is, as all the region is hit by cyclical fires, but Março has been pioneer in the adoption of measures for the forest. So the municipality is committed in this project, and certainly it's not by chance. So in this project, the aim is to join together students, architects, carpenters, citizens, technicians, and politicians, and not only to test new solutions to use of wood, but to discuss the future of the possibilities of the forest in this region. So we planned a sequence of actions and events, and the common thread is the development of an equipment for the museum. As it is an open-air museum, this equipment must be itinerant. So it will be a competition opened, particularly for students of architecture and design, but it's open for all people, to develop an equipment in wood that may be itinerant and may be used in different locations in a village or near a river or in a mountain. So we already started the workshops with students of architecture and design, and with the support of ITM, of Institute of Land and Memory, and with the support of University of Senior here in Março. We are going to develop a survey of this community's relationship with the forest, with wood, with exploitation, commercialization, also with resin, with cork. So we already had the first meeting with the students of the Cultural Landscape Master, and also with the Senior University to prepare this survey on video, recording, stories, memories, and the use of the forest resources. So in September we will have Cortiçada Art Fest, the festival. Okay. festival, and we will build together this shelter for this museum, and it will be probably on Saturday 13. We will meet together in this shelter with Sami Rintala, with Camilo Cabello, with students of architecture and from the cultural landscapes and Universidade Senior to talk about these issues. So the Landscape Together project is a project founded by Creative Europe that aims to realize several cultural dimensions of this museum on the landscape. It runs for 4 years and it brings together 17 national and international partners, expanding the networks of municipalities, in addition to Proença, Sertã e Oleiros. Now we have Idanha Nova and Pedrógão Grande. So at Landscape Together, with the involvement of these partnerships and communities, we will develop 2 more artworks, one developed by a French collective from France and another from a German, and 7 cultural trails with the support of Polytechnic Castelo Branco, with the Signet project and with the Communication Turismo Centro Portugal. One of the most pressing issue is what direction to lead this transformation in this territory. We have lifestyles that are no longer rural. We didn't find these rural habits. We find urban lifestyles. The agricultural structure is no longer effective. So what kind of development do we want to this urban network? So it is in this context that we joined the Architecture Department of the University of Coimbra and Polytechnic Milan. And over the next 4 years, master students will develop projects and theses for this territory, looking for solutions that contribute to an intelligible, readable region, in the sense of Renato Secchi, readable that contribute to a feeling of belonging to a territorial community, so that in the long term lead to a transformation towards building a region with a geographic, historic and cultural identity and economically sustainable. So, let's finish. Okay. So, between the timeline, what we have been doing, what we are now developing, so in the next 4 years we hope to start seeing an itinerant cultural equipment with activities in mountains and village, river beach, with the involvement of communities in walks, exhibitions and conversations. So we hope to start visualizing to see how can this territorial community can work. So we need really this imaginary so that we can give meaning to this shelter that moves to this itinerant museum, open air museum. Okay, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was just wondering, because it's open air art project, and I was wondering if you had degradation or alteration because of animals, human, wind, climate, and did you take in an account? And I didn't, I think I didn't understand, but my question was also, is it permanent or is it going to be, is it meant to be disappeared in, I don't know, 10 days, 5 days, 10 years, 5 years or more?
Okay, so the question of permanence and temporary is an important question. So these artworks are permanent. The concept of permanent in artworks is 10 years.
Okay.
But we have this big question and big issue that is the maintenance and the long term. So what we are developing now is how can we develop this museum and it be sustainable and keep these artworks being an attraction so people can relate and come here. So we developed an association Cortiçada Art Fest, with a network of municipalities, and its main goal is to keep these itineraries and these artworks. Of course, one of the first questions is really the project, the choice of the location, and then the project of the artwork. So it can be in a good shape at least for 10 years. That's so.
I had also another question. I was wondering when you choose the location, did you take into account that maybe some, I don't know, animals will be disturbed by this architecture, and maybe, I don't know, I was thinking about this beautiful orange and yellow robes. I don't know how you call it.
Yes.
And maybe I thought maybe birds or animals can stay there and it would be.
Yeah.
So.
The place of that artwork for Os Ventos is far away from the area of Serra das Talhadas where there are wild birds.
Okay.
It was carefully chosen with the municipality. In this moment, that place, we were there for 3 weeks putting the ropes.
Oh.
And it's really frightening because we don't hear birds at all. Neither in the morning, neither at the end of the day.
Okay.
No birds. And we were there 3 weeks, so there was time. So the ecosystem is so, I think, destroyed. I'm not a specialist, but that's what it seems. That we hope that his artwork does not spoils, but leads to a better transformation. We hope that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Could you speak more near to the microphone? Não consigo. Tinha falado mais perto. Aquela, tinha falado mais perto do microfone. Pois, mas não sei se consigo.
Okay, thank you for your intervention. I just had a question regarding the educational programs that you're planning to create. I was wondering, will that be for different type of students, only for university, or will it be adapted to different age or in different nationality maybe?
Okay. We are now working on that. So we have a partner that is Museu Chile de Leco in Spain, who has a great experience because they have an open-air collection of Chile de Leco, and so they have to reinvent educational programs to bring public and see in other ways those artworks. And so they are our partner for these to anchor these programs. They will work. They are developing different workshops that will aim municipal technicians, people that work in schools, and the aim is to develop 3 or 4 different types of education programs. 3 is for sure, is for one more related for school for different levels, not one for a year, but for different for groups. One for more dedicated for families. When you say families, usually is with younger children, and one for groups of friends. So it's known now that there are many groups, sometimes young groups, but many times also retired people who no longer work. So different kinds of approach to conduct the visit in a more interesting way. And in the next cultural trails, the QR code will have not only the interviews but also the educational program.
So thank you for your presentation and congratulations, because it was very interesting with interesting activities. I have a question. Are you aware, you mentioned the municipality of Sertã. Are you aware of the prehistoric art that exists there, which could be also interesting to include in these activities? There is an interpretation center, but the research stopped. I don't know why. I was responsible for the research regarding rock art in 2008 and 2009, sorry. But then everything stopped, I don't know why. And there is another rock still covered by earth. One of the rocks that we discovered in 2008 was previously covered by earth and appeared because of the rains and the fires before those rains. And since the land is in the hills, the rains excavated in a certain way this rock and it appears. So I wonder if you are aware of this prehistoric art, and what is the interest of the municipality continuing to study these rocks and include them probably in this project.
Okay. I'm not completely aware of this project. In this moment, we are working with the municipality of Sertã, with a team of cultural development, and we are asking them to make a survey of the most important cultural features. I hope they will give us feedback of that. If not, we will ask for that in concrete. Yes, I would like.
It's a publication because I published a lot, also with Sara Garcês. I don't know if she's is back. We both studied those rocks and published in several articles and conferences. So there's a lot in English, published in English, some articles also in Portuguese. So there's plenty. I can send the PDFs if you wish.
I would like very much.
Okay.
But that is one of the questions of this kind of project. I think is. In one hand, we have to. It is important to receive from the municipality or from the technicians the surveys. What are the main feature of this region? But on the other side, we also have to go by our own feet, because it's impossible to know everything. There are, we saw today there are so many things happening with the universities, and of course the technicians cannot know everything. So we have to to go. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luís, and thank you. Como é que se faz a pôr em todo o ecrã? Ok. Se faz a pôr em todo o ecrã. monitor, Sara. Non sta a ouvir o... Sorry, as a little technical problem. I will be present a project of Regional Directorate of Museum of Molise, is a peripheral office of Ministry of Culture in Italy, and I will be present an enhancement project in the territory of the 10 cultural sites managed by Regional Directorate in Molise. Little question to wake up all the public before lunch. How many people know where is Molise in Italy? Okay, I help you with the next slide. Molise is in the northern part of the southern Italy, and we have a little part of the sea coast in Adriatic Sea, but the most part of the region is mountainous. And we have some touristical attendance, not mass touristical, but seasonal and selected touristical movement. Regional Directorate of Museums manage 10 sites of culture, positioned in the site with the markers, mainly located in the 3 main cities, Venafro, Isernia, and Campobasso. And I show you shortly the characteristics. We have 4 archaeological museums. The National Museum of Paleolithic of Isernia is one of the most ancient attendance sites, human attendance sites in Italy, since 600,000 before Christ. And the Samnites Museum in Campobasso talk about 4,000 years of history of Samnium. It's the region inhabited for the pre-Roman people of the Samnites, one of the strongest pre-Roman people. Archaeological Museum of Venafro in Venafro region, Venafro city, sorry, and show most part of the Roman city of Venafro, famous in Roman world for the olive oil. And Archaeological Museum of Santa Maria delle Monache in Isernia show a Roman part of Isernia, but also several objects by the main Italic sanctuary of Pietrabondante, is the main sanctuary of Samnite Confederation. 2 archaeological areas, the Italic sanctuary of Pietrabondante, more or less 1,000 meters before the sea, in the mountainous area, and the monumental complex of San Vincenzo al Volturno was one of the main powerful abbey, Benedictine abbey in the high Middle Age, but was abandoned in the 11th century. 3 castles, the Capo Castle in Gambatesa with frescoes of Donato da Copertino. The Castle of Civita Campomarano is one of the castle that remain with the Angioine military architectures, at the National Museum of Pandone Castle in Venafro with a spectacular horse frescoes, and host also the National Museum of Pandone Castle of Middle Age until Modern Age arts, and finally in Campobasso Museum of Palazzo Pistilli, hosting a collection of contemporary arts. That are the 10 cultural sites managed. What is a museum today? Is a starting question to planning a project to the public. Taking from the recent definition of museum by ICOM in August or July 2022, museum is a site of culture, are the service of society by offering diverse experience for education, pleasure, reflection, and knowledge sharing. Is important word experience is the new words in the definition of museums. Experience is very important to be defined a museum with the site where people not learning only, not look only the collection, but have an experience to learning, to understand the past, and to educate them. So we have a community museum. Is museum lived by the local community, but for that, museum is also a museum for community. Not is only museum for the managers, not is only museum for specialists, not is only museum for scholars. It's a museum for community that hosting in her territory the museum. A little bit coming back in the change of the structure of Italian Ministry of Culture, because this is important to the planning in the next time, the role of the state museums. Before 2014, the local office in the region in Italy are archaeological superintendents, fine art superintendents, and architectural landscape superintendents that are the power of protection, enhancement, and valorization. We have all the role in the heritage in all the region. After the 2014, the reform divided the power. Archaeological, fine arts, and landscape superintendents, we have only protection in the heritage, and a new created regional directorate of museum take the power in enhancement, valorization, and local network creating. So take the manage of museum and all the things around the managing of museum. Enhancement, valorization, and creating local networks with other entities, not states, that manage a local site, a cultural site in the region. What is changing in society after the pandemic is only a very short theoretical part, only to understand the way that have taken by the regional directorate of museum in Molise. In positive consequence, have a more necessity to social connectedness, changing the political structures, are more solidarity, embrace new technology. We have the positive consequence that taking in account to planning the enhancement of museum. Negative consequence, political conflict, prejudice, racism, that not interesting directly the museums, but we have a social inequality, erosion of democratic institution. Museum for public is also democratic institution, because in the museum is a local site, is a social site when the public also can discuss and learning, and this is the base stone of democratic. So, a little passage between the global years of understanding in 2018 and the post-pandemic consequence, because perhaps in 2018, the global understanding years anticipate some prevision of post-pandemic. Global sustainability will be challenged and to a large extent decided in low demographic densities territories. So the low demographic density territories like Molise perhaps are the protagonists of the well practice in post-pandemic times. The challenge for the low demographic densities territory are specific when compared by the sites, but they are not different since current sustainability challenges are global and integrated. Some consideration by Carletti in the post-pandemic consequence between the most of all pandemic consequences. Need of promotion of new educational paradigms capable of bringing the individual back to the centers, understood as a critical agent of change, and educating to critical and reflective thinking constitutes. Museum can be take that role in educating project. With a strategy for 2023 and 2024 in Regional Directorate of Museum of Molise. First, the stone of start, analysis of publics in the past years and analysis of public today. If a museum don't know the public, cannot work into planning the futures, because many activity must to be planned in the basis of the public. 3, mapping and analysis with local main stakeholders, because a museum cannot have lacking to the situation of territory around. And 4, relating with local association and people. Action 1, a very big work of statistic in the public in past years, above all before pandemic, during pandemic, and after pandemic, so the past year, the 22. You can see in general we have low attendance of public during 2020, 2021, and a very big recovery of public in 2022. Touristically, Molise have a region that have literally assaulted by the Italian touristic. In 2020, it's not possible to go outside the country to the holidays. And so the Molise region, that Italian people say Molise don't exist because it's a very inner and little region, but several Italian people don't know where is Molise also Pierluigi. And in pandemic time, it is not possible to go in foreign country to holiday, and several Italian people discovered literally Molise at a touristically level. So after the pandemic, we have upgraded in paying people. So it's over 25 years people, but lacking also today in free entrance people. It's the minor-aged people, because in Italian States Museum, until 18 years is free entrance, until 25 years is €2, and above 25 years is full price. Yearly statistical in single site, for example, for the archaeological area is in open air, and so in pandemic time is not too restriction like a closed site like a museum. You can see the attendance is not drastically lowered in the pandemic time, but is good hidden in the post-pandemic time. In the past years, we have much attendance that in pre-pandemic. In the museum, for example, very lowered in the pandemic time, but in the first years considerably. After pandemic, 2022, we have several augmentation of the public. In the castle is the same. Closed site, few attendance during pandemic time, but big attendance after the pandemic time. So it seems the passing work by the tourist we have stayed in Molise during pandemic time, perhaps have augmented the interest from the Molise after the pandemic. Monthly statistically very important because, for example, we have a very low attendance month in January, because in not touristic time no have tourism and local people not attend the museums, and this is a starting point to planning. More activity to the local people, not think about only in the touristic people. In high attendance months, for example, August, we have several attendance. And so the statistics show you where working, where focus the valorization in what public and also in what time of the month. From the statistically, we have some projection in what the way for the future. Reading and use of statistical data to understand where to operate in the promotion. In post-pandemic situation, we have growing paying audience, and so that imply two actions: strengthening the ticketing systems, like possibility to pay with a card, not only with notes, and strengthen cooperation with local accommodation. The second point of post-pandemic system, not paying public in slight degrees, because the school in 2020, 2021 not try scholar visits. And so the post-pandemic action that the statistic advise us is strengthen the dissemination of the educational offer for schools, strengthens cooperation with training institution, and quality training event. Action 2, the project that I've carried out. Protocol with local stakeholders to make a local network to the main partners that we believe is important to the museums. Regional School Office of Ministry of Education to disclosure an educational offer of Regional Directorate for students and for teachers. The School of Carabinieri students, Carabinieri is the other policial force in Italy, to disclose the state heritage to the scholars that in the future make a Carabinieri, and training in the fight against illegal trafficking of heritage, in the study visit, and in the museum states practical workshop on ancient materials, exploring the collection, the archaeological collection, the fine arts collection, to be training the eyes of the future Carabinieri in reconnecting fakes or original in arts and in archaeology. To Episcopal Curia of Termoli-Larino. Termoli-Larino is the Adriatic Sea region, is the most important touristical attractor in Molise for the beach. And so disclosure of state heritage in touristic area, to have an info point at Termoli, is the main cities with beach touristic, and periodic exhibition in the sea area to try in the inner region and in the state sites in the inner region more touristical people. With National Boarding School Mario Pagano to disclose the state heritage in the very ancient and prestigious boarding school, with district visit and training meeting in the school of the professional by the Directorate in the school. With Architect Foundation of Campobasso to training and museography, training meeting with credits for the architects in the museums, and support in telling historical building of museum. More or less, the works exploring the architectures, the architects, the training course in the museum, to have specialistic people that give us information of historical architecture of the building of museum, to make other museological pathways, not only in the bosques, not only collection, but also in the architecture of museum that can have interest of the visitors. Action 3, the training offers for schools with a different vision of the traditional learning, before stimulus and motivation to discovery. The experience and only at the final, the notion. And learning doing, like Lord Baden-Powell of Gewell and Maria Montessori says, learning by doing, not learn by watching. This is very important because the experience before the conception is very successful action in the learning the children, the boys, and to approximate the children, the boys, to a museological themes. So the high school, for activity for high school in Italy, the Ministry of Education had from, I believe, 15 years, a program that provide some hours after the outside the school in the enterprises of institution to connect works, jobs, and learning. This is a program made in the State Museum of Molise, for example, for artistic high school. We have make a 3D scanner and imprinting for tactile copy and facial reconstruction of the Bulgarian school of the grave found near Campobasso. Or for the scientific high school, organizing heading and museology workshop for primary school. The boys of high school learning and after have mentors to the children. For humanistics high school, critical reading of the room panels. For example, in the Some Nights Museum, we have the necessity to change the panels because we have too much text, too technical works. But before archaeologists reading the panels, I wanted to have the opinion of the really public, in this case the teenagers. With Artistic School, a project of museum gaming to make a video game and board game to the public in a specific theme that lack in the museum history. Is the Some Nights Wars between Some Nights and Rome. Action 3 is very new, developing in the past weeks. The project Arts, attracts research, tourism, development. Obviously, the acronym is in the Italian works, not in English. Is a open by all the managers of restaurants, bed and breakfast, and hotel in the region, to mapping the attendance of the restoration structures, and have an idea of the type of the public possibly entering in the museum. What the public, in what time, for example, how many days staying in the single sites of the regions, and is directed by the managers of the hotel, restaurant, bed and breakfast to starting creating a local network between the state museums and the restaurant, bed and breakfast and hotel. And so, starting from the museum to the bed and breakfast, hotel and restaurant, a quest asks to mapping interaction information about the museums. But after, from the hotel, bed and breakfast and restaurant, a direction in the museum with interaction information about museum in the restaurants, bed and breakfast, hotel, public tickets sell point after. With the introduction of electronic tickets, also is possible to buy in internet the tickets of the museums, and also will be possible to have in the restaurant, bed and breakfast and restaurants sell points of the ticket of museums. And it is a two-steps project, September-December, by an Erasmus Plus stage by University of La Coruña. We have mapping how many hotels, how many bed and breakfasts, how many restaurants, and contacts, and is in that period with a stage of graduation in tourism of University of Molise. We have created the Google document questionnaire and have sent it by the single restaurant, bed and breakfast and hotel asking to respond of the question. In conclusion, what the way for museum in low-density demographic territory for next years? What the way of the one region of like Molise in the post-pandemic time? Visitor tracking as a basic for strategic planning. Now your public. Regional networking and less people with protocols, with network of the manager of restaurant, bed and breakfast and hotel. More vision of museum as a social space. When the school have introduced by the program, education program, not created for the occasion, for the moment, but in the normal yearly program of museums, normal yearly necessity of works in museums, introduce the schools at the level of the schools in some tasking that is adequate for students. It's a scheduled moment with the population in ordinary time of museums. Create occasion to discuss, create occasion to showing sometimes about cultural heritage, and make that a moment to discuss between the social, between the inhabitants in the museums. And finally, thanks to my colleagues and the students, they have carried out a stage to the project they have presented today. Thank you to the attendance.
Any question?
I just wanted to make this observation that this example of project of Davide is of course very similar to others, but it's completely contextualized within the specific needs of the cultural, let's say, tradition, historical background of the region. And this is precisely the trick for what we try to do. We don't have a recipe every time. For example, I think I can disclose this here. Some time ago we thought on, there was this idea of establishing an ITM branch there, and things moved up and then went back, and we never force. We always see what should be the best. What is important is that in the end things go in a convergent direction. Okay? So, thank you very much, Davide. I don't know if anyone else wants to. Otherwise, thank you again, and we will have lunch now. So, we will have then lunch, and we resume here at 2:30. As I said, the General Assembly will be an occasion for us to discuss also on matters that are pending, and particularly the debate on complexity. Because in the end, Apheleia, as we will see this afternoon, what it tries to do is to design, to identify tools that allow us to bring together different energies, different approaches that can become, can converge and combine in order to transform the reality of communities in the way they wish. So this is the big challenge, and it's a challenge which directly relates to the considerations Piero made this morning about complexity. Okay, have a nice lunch.